Hi, and welcome back to Katie and Mama Learn. This week, I wanted to talk to you about teaching language skills through reading skills. And I did some research on the specific study that was done by a psychologist and her name is Susan Buckley, and she is a professor of developmental disability, and she's the director of science and research of Down Syndrome Education International. She is globally recognized for her research into the education and development of children with Down syndrome. And she came across, so she's been working on these theories for years, like 30 years. And she has also has extensive research on specifically helping children with Down syndrome to communicate through the use of reading. And her findings have been that kids with Down syndrome can use reading. They can learn at an early age to read, and that this ability to read at such an early age can become a door to learning language. And she said that kids could learn as early as 2 years old, which is unbelievable to me. My daughter had open heart surgery when she was 5 months old. I really wish I knew this ahead of time, that I just came across this study now. But at the same time, I don't think she would have been capable. She was really her whole first year in the process of healing from her surgery and spent a lot of time in hospitals back and forth and, just recovering. Anyway, but this is amazing information. And that's why I want to share it with you in case you're in a situation where your child is maybe just about to turn 2 or near 2, and this is something that they could totally be capable of. So she talked about how in this article that I was reading that speech and language development benefits working on reading. And she said one of the reasons for delays with children, language delays for children with Down syndrome, is that their language learning is held back because of difficulties accessing language solely through the auditory channel, which is hearing. And reading opens them up to be able to find another way to recognize language through reading. And even signing, is helpful with it. So one of the things she did say too is that a lot of times, with a child who has like progress in reading has led itself to progress in spoken language and short-term memory skills, which is really amazing when you think about it. That she also mentions in this article that a lot of kids with Down syndrome are held back in terms of not being allowed to learn to read because they don't have the phonological skills and they don't pass certain intermediate tests, like their letter recognition in terms of the sounds that they make. One of the things, and I'll just read this to you, is she talks about how when we look at a relationship between understanding language, which is receptive language, and spoken language, which is the expression language in kids with Down syndrome, the receptive language is much more advanced, which that means you're understanding. So you can say something to your child like, go get this book, or, your cup is on the table, and they'll walk and get it, even though they might not be able to express, oh, my cup was on the table, but they're able to understand more. And then she said that they found a relationship between vocabulary comprehension and word reading. That is, being able to read helps children with Down syndrome acquire and understand new vocabulary and sentence structure. And this is so interesting because she said they do not need phonological skills in order to begin to read. And this is huge. I mean, this should be like blared everywhere because the ability that your child can begin to recognize words and word patterns in chunks of learning sentences and words will help them to be able to form sentences in their own language and communicate. And she talked also about how children with Down syndrome were not considered candidates for the reading program because they had low scores on phonological skill readiness on tests. And she said the information that she had was the kids didn't need that. They didn't need that in order to read. And so from there, what do we do with this information? So obviously your kid's not going to pick up any book and just start reading. I do have a video all about how to teach your kid to read using this book that I used called Teaching Reading with Children with Down Syndrome. I have a video on that, which I will link below. But it was really interesting because I remember I was talking to, and I taught my daughter how to read using the sight word method. And basically, you're taking sight words, they're memorizing the sight words, and then, very small amount of words at a time. So like maybe 5 or 3 words at a time that they memorize on index cards. And like I said, I have a video about this. But I was talking to my daughter's piano teacher, and she is in her late 70s. And we were talking, and I said that Katie was beginning to read, and I was just thrilled. And I said but she's not using phonics, she's just using the sight word method. And she said, yeah, that's how I learned to read. She said, we all did. That's how we used to learn to read. And it just got me thinking, like, I remember, and I did some research about this too, but like in the 1940s, and you might have heard of these Dick and Jane books where see Dick run, see Jane run, see Dick and Jane run. And they're very simple, and they use, they're very short words like a CVC words, which are consonant, vowel, consonant words. But I thought it was really interesting because that method was taught even, for many, many years and still is taught today. When I was teaching, there were first grade teachers who had all of the sight words that their students had to memorize up in the room. I hung them up too. And it just occurred to me that, like, it's so interesting because, like, kids with Down syndrome are so smart. Like, if you just give them the opportunity and the patience to work with them and give them their own pace, and they can do it. It's like, it's amazing that they'll be able to do it at the end of the day. They'll be able to learn to read, and these skills that we can give them, and the exposure to these words and just these little things, you can teach your kid to read very easily just using sight words, and they don't need to do the phonics at first. But anyway, this whole article was just talking about how the kids that have learned to read at an earlier age were like phenomenally further advanced in their language ability to speak and have conversations, as opposed to kids who were not exposed to sight word methods of learning to read. And like this book, which all talks about the sight word method, like my piano teacher said, that's the way they learn to read. And it's not like an earth-shattering, earth-breaking method. Sight word reading has been taught for years, and many kids learn to read through the sight word method. Phonics was only something that was started in the 70s. And it's great. You need to be able to sound out words. I think that's important. And I think you can eventually get there with children with Down syndrome, but it just takes a lot longer. I've tried to do that with my daughter, and there are times she's getting it really easily. And there are times that when she sounds out a word, by the time we come to the last sound, she forgets that initial sound. So that's a little bit harder for me with her. But your child might do better at that. But anyway, back to what I wanted to discuss this week. So I have some examples of, I have a video all about how to teach your kid to read using the sight word method and the method that I use and how I did it. But if you're somebody who your child is very young, maybe 1 year old, 2 years old, 3, 4, 5, it doesn't matter. I didn't teach Katie to read until probably a year ago. So she just turned 8. So maybe a year and a half ago. But I would have done it sooner had I read this article. But I also thought she might not be capable of doing it. But I will share with some of the things that I have done with her, which have worked. And that is doing working memory activities. So your working memory is what you're able to use just in conversation, or like if I tell you to, hey, go into the kitchen, grab me a tissue and a spoon. So your working memory is, can you remember those 2 things that I asked you to do? Or a lot of times there's something called Kim's game, which is identifying missing objects. You put like a key, a coin, and maybe a spoon, and then, you cover it up and take one away and then ask the kid what's missing, and I have some examples of activities I did with Katie that I still do with her. I still practice these working memory activities. This is one, it's called Seekaboo. They have all different objects on them, and I'll add a video of me doing this with Katie. When I first started it, she had a really hard time remembering, what object was coming next. So you put them face down and then you start flipping them over. Like, oh, it's a dog. And what's over here? An umbrella. What was over there? Oh, it's a dog. But you can build up to like 7 objects. And that is a great way to teach them working memory, to start the practice of working on your working memory. And there was a quote that said, strengthening your visual working memory and concentrating by forcing your brain to create a mental snapshot of the objects makes this skill so heightened so that you're able to begin the process of reading and practicing memorizing those words. So these little working memory activities are great for developing that skill that you're going to need to memorize the sight words for reading. And then, of course, for language. But that's one thing. Another idea that you might want to get is this thing called, it's this MagnaTalk matchup game. So basically it has a divider between you and your kid. And I have a video of this that I will also add below. And then there's certain objects in it. And it really, there's so many skills they learn with this. It's following directions. It's auditory learning, but it's also their working memory on, put the little sleeping bag on top of the, or near the tree. And then they're learning, prepositions to, like near or below or before or on top, that kind of stuff. So that's an activity. I also do this sand tracing of letters. It's a little sand tracing thing. The kid gets the letter. You can put the letter and lean it there. They have to either use their finger or a stick and make the letter. And then you can remove the letter and say, we're making letter C. Let me see if you know how to make letter C. And that also practices working memory. Memory games. So I do a lot of memory games with Katie. They have all different pieces. I don't ever use all of the pieces. I play with her and maybe we'll use 8. So there'll be 4 matches. And, you start out smaller and then you can build up to bigger and bigger amounts of things that you have to remember. Where was that thing? When you flipped it over, where were the cherries? Where was the frog? That kind of thing. And that also develops working memory. So that's where I would start. If I was starting at the beginning of wanting to teach my child to read, but we were not ready maybe to do sight words, and I would even just try it. I would try some small sight words and do something similar to like the Dick and Jane books. One of the other things that I would definitely do, and I have done in the past, but is make your own books. And I think you probably have seen videos that I've done where I make a lot of my own books with Katie. But I would make books that are very simple in terms of the language that you use. So I have a book just like I see. So I see Mama. I see Dada. I see Lucy, our dog. I see and her brothers. And a picture of them on every page. And the only thing on the page is I see and then that person's name and the picture of that person. So it's very minimal words, but she can read it. And like if your child is just starting out, it's a great place to start. And then do those words on the index cards for sight words. And even if you don't want to go crazy, like I'm teaching my kid to read, this is a great way to teach them to read without really going crazy with trying to have them memorize, especially if they're in the book, their pictures are in the book, people they know are in the book. It'll be so much more interesting to them and they'll be excited about doing it. And that's another thing with all things with kids with Down syndrome, your excitement, your encouragement, and their ability to see the joy in your face. As you know, if you have a kid with Down syndrome, they can read you so easily to see if you're upset or you're not happy. And the more you are encouraging and happy and just, joyful in the learning, they will be too. So I hope this helps. And I will add a bunch of videos to the end of this one. And let me know what you do with your kid. I always enjoy hearing from you. And thanks so much for watching. I truly appreciate it. So I hope you have a great day. I'm working right now. We're going to do a little activity with Katie and with her working memory. So this is one of the activities I like to continually do with like memory games and also activities where she has to remember to bring 2 objects to me, any kind of working memory activity. for her to practice. So all right, so let's look at what we have. This is called Seekaboo. You can play it however you want it. This is what we're doing right now, just to practice working memory. Yeah, so let's start. What do we have first?
Banana. So, blocks. Dog. Fish.
A goldfish. All right, let's flip them over. We're going to flip them all over and see if you can remember. Okay, let's listen now. We're going to remember what we put down. What was the first thing here? Do you remember?
Banana.
Let's check and see if you're right.
Yes.
Banana. It was a banana. Great job. Okay, what was the second thing? Do you remember?
So.
Was it a shirt? Let's peek. Oh, you were right. What was after the shirt?
Block.
Oh my goodness.
Banana.
We have the banana, the shirt, the blocks. What was next?
Dog.
Was it a dog?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that's so easy. And what was the last thing?
Goldfish.
It was the goldfish. Very good. Okay, so sometimes it's not that easy for her to do. So and a lot of times you can make up to 7. Look who's there, you silly goose. You were so silly. So you can make up to 7 little circles that she has to remember, or your child has to remember, and it's really good for working memory. So basically, I'll do another one so you can see what it looks like. Hopefully it'll be more difficult so you can see when I first. So we have all of these set up. Let's look at our first one. Should we look at them? We have a tricycle. We have an apple. You like to eat apples. Yeah, an apple. A square. A green square. What's that? Sneakers. Socks.
Diamond.
And a diamond. Okay, now we're going to flip them over. You want to help me flip them over? Flip over the apple. Flip over the green square. Flip over the red sneakers. Flip over the socks. And flip over the triangle. Okay, can you remember?
Diamond.
The diamond, sorry. It was a diamond. Mommy's silly. That's silly. Okay. Okay. All right, wait a minute. Katie, come over here. We're not finished. Hey, don't get distracted. We want to stay focused. Okay, what was the first thing? Do you remember? No. What was the first picture? Do you remember the first thing that was under here?
Bicycle.
Yes, it was a tricycle. Good job. Yeah, you like to drive a tricycle. Well, all right, and now I'm going to... And let's flip this one back over. That was the tricycle. What was this one?
My box.
Well, let's see.
Apple.
It was the apple. So let's flip them both over. Whoops. So we had the tricycle and the apple. Okay. So we have the tricycle, an apple. What was this one? Tricycle, apple. What is this one? Do you remember?
Square.
A square. You're right. Okay, let's flip them all over. Okay. Let's think. What was this one?
No.
Nope, what was this one?
Bicycle.
Tricycle. And then the apple. And then the...
Square.
And what was this one?
Sneakers.
Sneakers? You're right. It was sneakers. And what was after...
R.
Yes, what was after sneakers?
So.
Socks.
It's all by itself.
You like to put socks on all by yourself. You're very good at that. You can put, yes, you can put your sneakers on by yourself too. That's great. And what was the last one?
Diamond.
Oh my goodness, you are so smart. Good job. So it isn't always that easy for her, but when I've done this a lot, so she might just be getting used to it. But this is really helpful for working memory. This is really helpful for working memory and practicing working memory so that she can begin to memorize sight words and then remember them. And I also put phrases around the house with sight words we're using too. All right. So I hope this is helpful and you can do this with your child too. So I am working with Katie on this MagnaTalk matchup, which helps receptive and expressive language, but also following directions and auditory memory. So I'm working with her on her working memory, and this is all about following directions. And she has some pieces, I have some pieces, and then we have a scene. I'll show you. So you have a sleeping bag, a backpack, a chair, a pot of soup. What is this?
Bird.
A bird.
Chipmunk.
That's actually a squirrel.
Rabbit.
A rabbit.
fish.
A fish.
Deer. No.
Yeah, and that looks like a lunchbox. And here is a scene. This is a camping scene. Do you like to go camping?
Yes.
Look, you have the same thing on your side, and I have one. Okay, so let's try this. Put the rabbit. Look at the rabbit. It's like a little pink rabbit. That's it. Put the rabbit by the trees. Okay, let's see if you did. Let's check. Wow, you did. That's so great. So this is a great activity for receptive language, understanding directions, but it's also working memory. So she has to actually remember what I said and where to put it. And this also helps with reading skills. Put the squirrel behind the tent. Can you put the squirrel behind the tent? I'm using that word behind. Oh, you put the squirrel in the tent. Can you put it behind the tent? Oh, good job. Very smart. Okay, and now we have this big backpack. Can you put it near the little boy who's fishing? He might need that backpack. Can you put it right next to the little boy that's fishing? Wow, good job. Nice. Folding chair. Can you put the folding chair next to the tent? Good job. And put the cooler, the big cooler that has all their drinks and food in it. Can you put that by the campfire? No, that's a sleeping bag. Find the cooler. There it is. Can you put it by the campfire? Yeah. Nice job. Put the bird in the sky. Good job. So this activity is great for deductive reasoning, for following directions, but it really helps working memory. So you have to give a command and have your child see if they can complete it. And it's all auditory memory. And the working memory is so important for developing the skills they need to read. And this activity book and this whole little kit is so good for so many reasons. It also helps with storytelling. You can retell stories with it. You can make up your own stories. It's good for basic concepts and learning new vocabulary words that they might not have known. So I really like this activity for Katie. I've used it a lot with her. So let's do a little matching. Okay, can you match some? So we're gonna look at what we have, and it's your turn, so you can flip over 2. Go ahead. What is that?
Mama.
The mailman, the little mailman. All right, now you have another turn. You can turn one more over. Where do you think the match is? Right there, try it.
Mama.
It was a school bus, not the right match. Okay, now it's Mama's turn. Ooh, logs. A logging truck. And I'm going to try this one. Ooh, a school bus. But it doesn't match. Do you remember where the school bus is? Now it's your turn. Try. Oh, no, that's the mailbox. The mailbox truck. And where do you think the other mailbox truck might be? Yeah, try.
Fish.
Ah, fish.
Looking.
Or keep looking. Try it. Wow. Okay. So let's try that again. And this time, when you do it, let's follow the directions. Go straight down. Number 1 says you come straight down. Good.
Okay.
Now you come with number 2, and you have to come in all the way, meet that one there. And then number 3 is like that. K.
Okay.
Good.
Let's go.
Yes, a circle first. Good, and then a straight line down. Nice job. That's great.